as she is truly one of our biggest and most respected investigators and journalists in the field today. She has been a force in the UFO field for decades and has indeed set the high standards that most follow today. As a trailblazer, she has remained focused on the important issues and reports and has paved the way for all of us by tackling the challenges and producing award-winning results. She is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communication. She has devoted her documentary film, television, radio, writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. In addition to her many accomplishments and projects, Linda produces, reports, and edits the award-winning Science and Environment and Earth Mysteries news websites and Earthfiles.com. Hey guys, feel like I'm competing with the conversation. I don't know if everyone else can hear it. I can hear it. Sorry. In which she was honored with a Webb Award for News Standards of Excellence and a W3 Silver Award in the news category, an award for Standard of Excellence presented by the Internet's Web Award Association and Encyclopedia Britannica Award for Journalistic Excellence. She is heard annually on a monthly 3-hour radio news report about science, environment, and Earth mysteries on Premier Radio Network, Coast to Coast AM, throughout North America. She also co-hosts and reports with John Burroughs weekly on Phenomenon radio series on KGRA.com and reports monthly for Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online. She has written 4 books, An Alien Harvest that investigates the worldwide animal mutilation phenomena and the government policies of denial and cover-up. The new and expanded 2nd edition of An Alien Harvest was awarded Best Nonfiction by the Arizona and New Mexico Southwest Book Association in December 2015. Other books include Glimpses of Other Realities, volumes 1 and 2, which concern U.S. military intelligence and civilian testimonies about non-humans interacting with the Earth life. Her 4th book, Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, detailed her investigations of the complex crop formation phenomena in England, the United States, and Canada between 1999 to 2002. I have to encourage everyone in the room to read her entire bio in the event program to fully understand just a fraction of the accomplishments that we could fit in one volume of this. But for me, to list every award, TV, radio appearance, conference appearance, lecture, other remarkable works, I'd be here for the next 30 minutes, and I would be absolutely happy to do so if I wasn't taking time away from those of you that are very anxious to see her. She is a pioneer in our field. She's gorgeous. She's brilliant. She's kind. She is also right here, right now. Ladies and gentlemen, my hero, Linda Moulton Howe.
I love Chase. I love all of you because you are a representation of people on this planet who are not afraid to face facts and are not accepting just blindly government policies of denial. And it is as if the millennial generation is already racing past governments, because where I have been speaking in just the last 4 or 5 months, they are large audiences of people who are in their 30s and 40s who are bringing 10-year-olds, and the 10-year-olds say, Linda, ancient aliens. Tell us about the extraterrestrials from Alpha Centauri. And it means, in those simple words, from kids that are in grade school, they are so far beyond the question that keeps being posed: when will the governments, when will scientists confirm we're not alone in this universe? And what I'm going to share with you today, actually, this is the first moment in my life that I will go into some of the material in full that I have only done in excerpts prior to today, And when you hear where I'm going, you will understand why I and others have handled this material gingerly, because it's going to sound like something out of a Star Trek kind of scenario, and yet these were real typed letters that were sent to Art Bell and me in 1996. And it was April of 1996 when I began my first investigations. And the mystery was a metal. This is a close-up in high resolution. And for those of you who heard me doing the first reports in 1996, and this is 2017, I want you all, as I go forward, to know that Hal Puthoff, semiconductor experimenters, Cranford University, with X-ray crystallography in England, there have been about 20 scientists who have negotiated with me to take and do certain tests as long as they return pieces. And today, there is no one who has been able to reproduce this. There is no one who understands what its function would be. There is educated speculation, which I will get into. And there is no one anywhere who says that human science would layer at the micron level pure bismuth with magnesium zinc. The dimensions, so you'll have a little grasp of what you're looking at in all of those wavy layers. The pure bismuth is 1 to 4 microns, and the magnesium zinc alloy is 100 to 200 microns thick. And now let's compare. A human hair is about 100 microns wide, so that is about the size of the magnesium zinc layers. They're a tiny bit thicker. A red blood cell is about 8 microns in diameter, so the pure bismuth layer is twice the width of a red blood cell. And you're looking at this like an exotic metallic torte cake, 26 layers high. And that goes 1 to 4 microns, 100 to 200 microns magnesium zinc, 1 to 4 microns bismuth, 100 to 200, and it stacks up 26 layers. Each of the metal pieces that we had to study were about 2 inches wide, and they had a curvature that's built in each one that you can see here. This is the way it came. The black in here is the bismuth, which you can see in some layers. The strange layered metal came in a box through the United States Postal Service with a typed letter. And we're going back 21 years to mid-April 1996 when I was doing real X-Files news reporting for a weekly broadcast called Dreamland that was hosted by Art Bell. And we received the first of 4 typed letters, each postmarked from South Carolina and signed "Only a Friend." And later, the writer called me and explained that he was active Army en route to the Middle East and wanted me to know in case that he did not come back alive. His first letter was dated April 10th, 1996, and included several pieces of square-cut gray metal, not the bismuth-magnesium, but allegedly other metal squares in odd shapes cut from the same crashed UFO. There are startling statements that sound like science fiction, but as I read the entire first letter, no one has ever heard this from me before. Keep in mind, the Army man is allegedly quoting from his now deceased grandfather's diary, a grandfather who said he was in a security team that surrounded a wedge-shaped craft and, quote, "Granddad spent a total of 26 weeks in the team that examined and debriefed the lone survival of the Roswell crash," close quote. Now, this crash is not Roswell. This crash is on White Sands. The grandfather left a box with the various metal pieces in it, along with his diary of an extraordinary time in his life, and in fact, an extraordinary time in the history of this world. Now, here is the first letter from the Army guy with his grandfather's diary content. Dear Mr. Bell, I've followed your broadcasts over the last year or so and have been considering whether or not to share with you and your listeners some information related to the Roswell UFO crash. My grandfather was a member of the retrieval team sent to the crash site just after the incident was reported. He died in 1974, but not before he had sat down with some of us and talked about the incident. I am currently serving in the military and hold a security clearance and do not wish to go public and risk losing my career and commission. Nonetheless, I would like to briefly tell you what my own grandfather told me about Roswell. In fact, I enclose for your safekeeping samples that were in the possession of my grandfather until he died, and which I have had since his own estate was settled. As I understand it, they came from the UFO debris and were among a large batch subsequently sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio from New Mexico. My grandfather was able to appropriate them. He told me on the phone, and you won't see this in the letter, but he told me in that one phone call to me, my grandfather told me they had been ringing this craft shaped like a wedge of pie for several hours. And the military that were the backup and surrounding the area had left, but they left the security team around this craft that had been glowing with light for 3 hours from the bottom. And when the light went out, this man, the grandfather, told his grandson, writing this letter, that he reached over to the craft and pulled the 6 pieces off with his hand, that they were brittle, and he felt like he wanted to have some kind of a souvenir from whatever this was. Now, some people say that's highly unlikely and improbable. Other people suggest, and you will pick it up in this letter, that he may, because he was with this team, with this particular being for 26 weeks, that they may have gotten some material. How he got this is still unclear, but I've shared with you what his own grandson told me on the phone when he said he was shipping off to the Middle East and didn't know if he would come back, and he wanted me to know that his grandfather had admitted he pulled these off of the bottom of the craft that had glowed for 3 hours. That's why he put quotation marks around the word appropriate them, and stated that the metallic samples are pure extract aluminum. You will note that they appear old and tempered, and they have been placed in tissue paper and in baggies for posterity. So what he's talking about is that there's a mixture of metal samples, and that the first ones he sent were aluminum, not bismuth-magnesium. I have had them since 1974, and after considerable thought and reflection, I give them to you. Feel free to share them with any of your friends in the UFO research community. I have listened to many people over the years discuss Roswell and the crash events, as reported by many who were either there or who heard about it from eyewitnesses. The recent Roswell movie, and this is a reference to the UK Race and Tilly documentary that included black and white footage of an autopsy preparation of a 6-fingered humanoid and film inside a tent where UFO debris from one of the Roswell crashes included a control panel with 6-fingered hand imprints that I will talk about a little bit more. The recent Roswell movie was similar to my grandfather's own account, but a critical element was left out, and it is that element which I would like to share. As my granddad stated, the team arrived at the crash site just after the Army Air Force. In July of '47, the Army and the Air Force were still combined. They didn't separate until September. the AAF reported the ground zero location. They found 2 dead occupants hurled free of the disk, and he uses the word disk throughout his correspondence, but he also defines through his grandfather's diary that the actual shape was wedge, like a piece of pie. But you will find when you talk with a lot of people who they'll say, I saw a UFO, or it was a disk. And then when you have them draw their disk, it's a triangle, it's a box, it's a ball. Disk seems to be like Kleenex or Xerox now. It's a word that people put out there. I saw a disk, I saw a UFO disk, but it doesn't have to do with the actual shape. A lone surviving occupant was found within the disk, and it was apparent that its left leg was broken. In the Santilli footage, even if it's controversial, it does show a 6-fingered humanoid that has a broken open leg. There was a minimal radiation contamination, and it was quickly dispersed with a water solvent wash. And soon the occupant was dispatched for medical assistance and isolation. The bodies were sent to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for dispersal. The debris was also loaded onto 3 trucks, which finished the onload just before sunset. Granddad was part of the team that went with the surviving occupant, and the occupant communicated via telepathic means. It spoke perfect English and communicated the following. So this is from the grandfather's diary about the thought words coming into his mind and others at the scene. The disk was a probe ship, in quotes, dispatched from a launch ship, in quotes, that was stationed at the dimensional gateway to the Terran, another word for Earth, solar system. The occupants were part of a race of explorers from a solar system 32 light years from Terra. They had been conducting operations on Terra for over 100 years. Another group was exploring Mars and Io, a Martian moon. Each probe ship carried a crew of 3. A launch ship had a crew of 100. The disk that crashed had collided with a meteor in orbit of Terra and was attempting to compensate its flight vector, but because of the collision, the inter-atmospheric propulsion system malfunctioned, and the occupants had sent out a distress signal to their companions on Mars. The launch ship commander made the decision to authorize an attempted soft landing on the New Mexican desert. At the same time, the inter-atmospheric propulsion system had a massive electrical burnout. Inter-atmospheric means designed to move around in the atmosphere of Earth, as opposed to some sort of a large launch ship, which would be somewhere out in the solar system. And the disk was soon virtually helpless. There was another option available to the occupants, but it involved activating the dimensional power plant for deep space travel. However, it opens an energy vortex around the disk for 1,500 miles in all directions. Activating the dimensional power plant would have resulted in the annihilation of the states of New Mexico, Arizona, California, and portions of Mexico. Possibly even further states would have been affected, and thus the occupants chose to ride the ship down and hope for the best. They literally sacrificed their lives rather than destroy the populations within their proximity. The dimensional power plant was self-destructed. This is a key word in all of this, that there was a self-destruction mechanism which may or may not relate to why there is a consistent wavy pattern in the layered bismuth-magnesium that we're coming to. And the inter-atmospheric propulsion system also deactivated to prevent the technology from falling into the hands of the Terrans. The ETs did not want humans to have the dimensional power plant or the interatmospheric propulsion system technology is what this translates to mean. This was done in accordance with their standing orders in regard to any compromise with contact experience. Granddad spent a total of 26 weeks in the team that examined and debriefed the lone survivor of the Roswell crash. Granddad's affiliation with the project ended when the occupant was to be transported to a long-term facility, which I understand was to be Los Alamos. He was placed on board a United States Air Force transport aircraft that was to be sent to Washington, D.C. The aircraft and all aboard disappeared under mysterious and disturbing circumstances en route to Washington. It may interest you that 3 fighter aircraft dispatched to investigate a distress call from the transport experienced many electrical and malfunctioning systems failures as they entered the airspace of the transport's last reported location. No crash or debris of the transport was ever found, and the team was disbanded. That is something, if anybody listening wants to do some research, was there any disappearance in relationship to fighters and aircraft that was ever reported in the 1947 time period en route to Washington, D.C.? I haven't found any, but this is one of the values of communicating is this is so bizarre, and yet, when I get into the Bismuth-Magnesium, you're going to see why it's so extraordinary. And did it come from the bottom of this craft that had these beings and everything disappeared en route to Washington because some other alien presence did not want humans to have them or the technology? He says, well, I realize I have likely shocked you with this bizarre and incredible account, and seeking to remain unknown likely doesn't do anything for my credibility, and the metal samples only will likely add to the controversy. But I know that you will take this with a grain of salt, and I don't blame you, Mr. Bell. I just hope that you can understand my reasons and my own desire to maintain my career and commission. I am passing through South Carolina with an operational readiness mobility exercise and will mail this just prior to this exercise, possibly from the Charleston area. I will listen to your broadcast to receive any acknowledging or confirmation that you have received this package. This letter and the contents of this package are given to you with the hope that it helps contribute to discussions on the subject of UFO phenomena. I agree with Neil Armstrong, a good friend of mine, who dared to say at the White House, no less, that there are things out there which boggle the mind and are far beyond our ability to comprehend. Sign me a friend. His reference to astronaut Neil Armstrong seems extraordinary, but Air Force and Army people, they might have met each other in some way. Later, in another letter, he quotes his grandfather's diary, a saying that the crash site, here's Roswell, this is where we are today. Here is Sierra Blanca Mountain. Here is the boundary of what was then the White Sands Proving Ground, the name changed to Missile Range later on. Here is the Trinity site where we dropped the first atomic bomb test with Oppenheimer in July of 1945. And here is where Oscura, there are 2 peaks. There's a northern and a southern. And the idea is that what was coming down was on a trajectory. It may have been related to what was happening here between Roswell and Corona, because he doesn't give a particular date. But there is a hypothesis out there that whatever was coming down to Corona, they may have had an ejection pod. And the ejection pod, the craft was going this way or direction, and an ejection pod with the 2 beings came and got over Oscura Peak and then crashed right in this area. Here's Socorro, Magdalena. There have been crashes over here too. And there was a crash